I've been looking into the a little bit into the Beverley Allit case because there, you know, there seems to be a lot of similarities with the Letby case, and I think that she's another scapegoat. I honestly do think she was another scapegoat. Obviously, I haven't looked at apps, I've looked into it in that much depth, but in some, looking at, the situation, I mean, she was 4 murders, 3 attempted murders, and another 6 that she's supposed to hurt or injured in some way. So altogether there was 13. It's 6 and 7 again, it's, here we are with the 6s and 7s again. But anyway, I mean, Lucy in the end was 7 and 7, wasn't she? 7 and 7 attempted and 7 murders, but supposed one. But started off with the 6 and 7, didn't it? Until we had the retrial. But anyway, here we go. We're at 6s and 7s again. And 6s and 7s, it actually means confusion at 6s and 7s. I mean, that's what you're at 6s and 7s, your confusion. So it's not surprising they like you 6s and 7s as well to confuse us all. But I mean, Beverley Allit, it was back in the early 1990s. Beverley Allit was labelled Angel of Death, of course. And I remember at the time, when it was all over the news, I was back in the 1990s, it didn't register with me then, other than I had any reason. We didn't have the internet then to research things on. We didn't know. But looking into this now, there's so many parallels. And first of all, I want to start with the Letby case. And is she another scapegoat? This is really, it's really suspicious. And I would say, just to begin with, because I'm going to show bits of videos, but I just want to say that we're in a society that is basically controlled by narcissists and psychopaths, and both, those type of people. In a society that's controlled by those types, you have to have scapegoats. Narcissists have to have scapegoats because a narcissist can never admit to having made a mistake. They're incapable of admitting to ever having done anything wrong. They can't, right? So if something goes wrong in something that a narcissist is controlling, they have to have a scapegoat, because it has to be, if you could say accident, but if accident means that they look at fault, they should have stopped the accident, although they can't. They have to have a scapegoat. So in every family, I mean, I was the scapegoat in my family, right? So I know they have to have the scapegoat, and they look. So what happens in a hospital, often run by these types, whether it's the consultants, the narcissists, or the management, or all of them, and it's the easiest people to scapegoat are the low-level staff in any situation. Beverley Allit was a young, in her 20s, not very experienced nurse, and she was employed because they were understaffed, and because they should have been recruiting more experienced nurses, but they didn't. They employed her for that reason, to save money. It was a shoestring budget. According to a Trent Regional Authority report on the hospital staffing levels, there should have been double the number working on the children's ward, with at least 5 more doctors. So she had, and of course she was the perfect target. She would be the perfect target, simply because she had some problems as a teenager, i.e., it looks like she had did some kind of self-harm, or she was going up to the hospital with illnesses every now and again. And of course we know that was then labelled Munchausen. Wow, right? Which is a load of rubbish. But the fact that whether she self-harmed or whatever she did, or that she was in and out of the emergency department as a teenager, does not make her a murderer. But it does make her an easy scapegoat. if she's a teenager who's had some kind of problems. If they've got a nurse that's working in a situation like that on a ward, and they find out that she's had those kind of problems, she's a perfect person for them to home in on. So that's one of the differences between her and Letby. I mean, Lucy Letby didn't have that kind of background. She didn't really seem to have had any major sort of issues prior to becoming a nurse. But Beverley Allit had some. But other than that, there's really, I mean, but Lucy, of course, we know had other reasons for being targeted as a scapegoat, because Lucy was a type of personality who speaks out, who believes in justice, who wants to do things the right way. And they hate people like that too. They want people who shut up and, go along with anything that's a bit, will push things under the carpet and not rock the boat. And Lucy was rocking a boat. So Lucy was being targeted because she rocked the boat, because she was a woman who spoke out, because she was effectively, I don't know if you can call it a whistleblower. I mean, if you do it within the hospital, whether you have to go outside the hospital, but either way, she was pointing out mistakes, stuff like that. Beverley Allit was quiet, apparently. No one had a problem with her. Everyone liked her. She was, a nurse that no one seemed to have a problem with, a young nurse. This is an account by Dr. Sharith Nanayakara, who was one of the consultants working with Beverley Allit at the time. And this is what he says.
And the one on her right is the mother of that baby. And this is Katie. One twin, I told you, who was brought and confirmed dead in the casualty department, was the other twin, Becky. And when she died, the parents made this nurse a godmother. Can you believe? That's the level of respect they had, reliance they had, confidence they had on this nurse. It's not only the parents, almost all the ward staff had no problems with this nurse. Even I didn't have any concerns about this nurse because she was very quiet. She did attend to whatever I wanted when I asked for help. So at the time, remember, the parents had great confidence, and you can see the loving, smiling faces because the nurse was a godmother. Now,
but she was someone who they could find something on in the past. Those three babies that she was convicted of murdering, and one 11-year-old boy. Well, there's one 7-week-old, one 9-week-old, one 15 months old, and one 11-year-old boy. And then there was three children that she was convicted of attempting to murder, and then there was 6 that she was done for grievous bodily harm with intent. There was some twins involved. One of them murders someone called, I think, Becky Phillips, who, one of the babies that she supposedly murdered, also had a twin who was one of the ones she attempted to murder, called Katie Phillips. And so that the Katie Phillips survived and was partially paralysed and needs permanent help and support, I think, to this day. So, and there are other things wrong with her. So I would say that the 11-year-old boy that she's supposed to have killed it was put down as epilepsy, I think. So another of the one of the 15-month-old, I think, had asthma. There was 2 unexplained deaths, but there seemed to be, again, it's so-called unexpected, unexplained. There was the other one that she was accused of using insulin again, and there was the test showed the high insulin load, the insulin C-peptide ratio being such that they thought that she'd been poisoned with insulin. But again, nobody saw Beverley Allit do this. There was no witnesses to any of it. Again, it was all circumstantial evidence. Of course, again, there were expert witnesses on the prosecution side, but not on the defence side. So you had Roy Meadow, who was a paediatrician who, came up with the Munchausen by proxy nonsense. And then you had also for the prosecution the expert witness Vincent Marks, who was the expert in insulin, world-renowned expert in insulin apparently. So, you know, those two were for prosecution, but there was no expert witness for the defence in the Beverley Allit case. Yet again, this is what happens with the legal aid unfair trials. Anyway, I'm going to show, what's his name, Dr. Shagrin, I can't pronounce it again, Yakarara, Shatris Yakarara something. I'm going to show a video that he has made, or bits of a video that he has made. He was one of the consultants on the ward that Beverley Allit was on. And I'm going to show bits of a video that he made about this and some other things. Okay, so he's talking about the two consultants who managed the pediatric ward, which was Dr. Charith Nana Yakayakara, that's the guy talking, and Dr. Nelson Porter.
The two of us got together with the difficult of times. In spite of the workload, we got hold of the ward manager, sat down and went through all the cases. Some of the cases were transferred, therefore we didn't even have case notes, but yet we did compile a list and prepared a report, and we thought we will send a report to the hospital manager, not because we had any suspicions about these deaths, but it's just too much baffling and too much upsetting to all of us. So we prepared this report around mid-April. Report was prepared and sent to the manager. And who was the one who was selected was a renowned professor in the regional center, that's Sir David Hull, his late David Hull. We had great respect and admiration because he's a wonderful professor, very knowledgeable, unlike us. And he certainly has written a fair amount of books. Even now, Essential of Pediatrics was written by Hull and Johnston, which is being used, very popular book. So we agreed, even though I did highlight that he was not an independent expert because many cases were transferred to Queen's Medical Center, including the very death which I had written to.
So Dr. Hall, who was called in to do the report by the police and the management, was not independent. Even though he was called in to do an independent report, he was at the regional centre, so he wasn't independent because some of the cases that Beverley was accused of hurting or whatever were transferred there.
And I had no problems with him because I had great respect and admiration for his expertise and the knowledge and understanding. So he was asked specifically by the police to prepare a report and come up with his opinion. And not surprisingly, Sir David Hull did prepare a very thorough, detailed report, which was received within a few days. Next. Now, this is the summary of that report. Remember, strictly confidential, but this is nothing confidential now. Everything what I'm going to talk today is all open to the public. But this was confidential at the time. This was only handed over to the police, superintendent, hospital manager, the two of us, not even to the nurses, and of course to the regional medical officer. It's important that I read this. The report was prepared. The report actually had about 17 pages. Thorough report, fantastic report. And I can share the third para in the summary. Such a large number of events in such a short time period is in itself worrying, absolutely true. However, the primary concern of this report arises out of the finding that one boy suffered from hypoglycemic attacks, that's low blood sugar, that there is evidence to suggest that he has been deliberately injected with insulin. I'll talk about that in a minute. From my scrutiny of the 14 reports, I reached the following conclusion. This is the most important, these expert conclusions. In my opinion, in one infant, there was no unexpected event. In further 4, the event was unexpected, but a cause was found and could not have been anticipated or avoided. In 6, the event was unexpected. Whilst there are reasons why it occurred, there are grounds to review the management. In other words, he's trying to highlight that we in a peripheral hospital are not that well managed well, unlike in a tertiary center. That's another matter. The clinical cause of in these 3 was not the same, and the causes are likely to be different. And this is very important too. Nothing was similar. That's really the important thing I will emphasize. Many events in medicine remain unexplained, actually true. However, in the light of the findings in the case of Paul Crampton, that's the 6-month-old baby who had these repeated recurrent episodes of low blood sugar or hypoglycemia, who also found insulin levels in his blood. I am concerned about some of the other children, in particular Bradley Gibson and Patrick Elston. Now, Bradley Gibson is a 5-year-old boy who was admitted under Nelson Porter, had evidence of lower respiratory tract infection or chest infection, radiologically found, but he collapsed and had a cardiac arrest and was given repeated shocks and was transferred after resuscitation to Queen's Medical Center, where he was kept for many weeks and finally discharged and sent back to us, but escaped with very little brain damage, fortunately. And this was signed by David Hull. You can see date as 5/5/1991. That's a pretty good, thorough report. This is the summary. What I want to tell you is the 5-month-old baby with hypoglycemic attacks was managed by me twice over during a weekend and resuscitated him, and he survived.
Now that she's guilty anymore. I had no reason really to question it at the time. We didn't have access to the internet. But looking into it now, and what I know about Lucy, what I've seen about Ben Gee, Colin Norris, all these other nurses, and other, there's more, I don't know, whose names escape my mind, but all these other nurses that are being sort of scapegoated.
It's fairly typical of hospital management, I believe. You may disagree with me. Next. So now the devastating impact on the pediatric team was very well known. Coping under sub judice, the criminal investigations continued with the other management inquiries continuing. Believe me, a senior hospital sister committed suicide. And this is one of the dedicated, very intelligent, effective, caring sister, senior sister. She committed suicide. I might say why that is so. Now, in addition to the police getting the support, backup support, police led the investigation team, but they had enormous amount of experts, forensic, pathology, radiology, consultant pediatricians, case records, laboratory, and you name it. And on top of that, it is very interesting. They also had the statistics department from Royal College, from Leicester Royal Infirmary, statistics. And what they did was they identified each episode of collapse. And into that, they actually identified all the staff present, nurses, doctors, junior doctors, whoever. And they then identified recurring names of 2. The one was Beverley Allit and the other one was senior nurse manager. Senior nurse manager was dedicated. She did come all the time. And so sadly, every time a collapse occurred, she was present. Can you just imagine if there was only one consultant, perhaps our name would have been also in the same list. Anyway,
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it?
For the senior
Don't know why you
sister,
find
it
that
was
funny.
too much. Police hounding, questioning, and so on. She just committed suicide. The ward manager was again a very dedicated, hardworking, sincere sister. She just couldn't take it up. She tried to commit suicide, but she fortunately survived. But she became severely depressed and gave up her job. And she recently died. But that was another disaster. Now, the two consultants, we had some suspicion. We didn't know what to do. We sought help from professional bodies, DMA and MDU.
The police investigation in this case, in the Beverley Allit case, in the Grantham and Caversham Hospital Trust, wasn't directed at any one particular person. They brought in the police, and the police were investigating a lot of the staff in there. So they were hounding a lot of the staff in there, right? And my guess is there was probably a lot of negligence going on simply because it was underfunded and unstaffed. So, but they were going in, the police were brought in to find a scapegoat. So they had to find someone, so they've gone in and they're looking into all the staff. And they were causing all the staff a lot of distress. Yeah, not just Beverley Allit. Unfortunately, Beverley Allit was the one they finally... I mean, two nurses involved, the ward sister and a senior nurse in that case. When the police were investigating, the police were brought in and were investigating everybody in this Grantham and Caversham Trust, right, hospital. And at the time, when they were brought in, and they were looking at who they could frame for, well, they're looking at who they could potentially find as a murderer, and two of the staff that were investigated, because they were all being investigated, all the staff and the consultants, one of them attempted suicide, the other one committed suicide. Then Beverley Allit was later charged and convicted, but why were they then still looking for scapegoats, and why were they making the consultants redundant and all that? I mean, if it was all Beverley Allit, then there would be no need. I mean, in the Letby case, we've got the consultants are still working, aren't they? Although we've had sort of various sort of show arrests of management, certain management show arrests, I would call them, to make people think that they're doing something about the fact that they let this notorious Lucy Letby around the hospital, which is obviously ridiculous. But in this case, it seems like consultants were made redundant. Well, why were two consultants made redundant? I mean, if they did nothing wrong and it was I suppose what they did wrong was allow. But you see, the thing, it doesn't make sense, does it? Because the consultants don't employ the nurses. So, you know, how are they responsible for the nurse if she's doing these bad acts? And how is our other nursing staff were also, there was a midwife and somebody else who was responsible, were also supposedly scapegoated. Well, why? If the idea is that they had to find someone to blame for allowing Beverley Allit to be in that hospital, then surely that is management. It's only management. Okay, so here, this is an article from the 25th of January 1994. Doctors blamed over child killings. Allit inquiry finds scapegoats in the Independent. 2 doctors and 2 nurses have been singled out for blame by the official inquiry into the crimes of Beverley Allit, the nurse who attacked 13 children in her care, murdering 4. Well, supposedly, we're supposed to believe. I don't believe this anymore. The doctors and nurses were in charge of Ward 4 at the Grantham and Caversham General Hospital, and the Independent has learned from sources close to the inquiry that the consultant paediatricians Charith Nana Yakara and Nelson Porter are held at fault for the 58 days during which the serial killer was at large. Well, that's odd. How would they be at fault if it was a murderer? These are doctors. This is crazy again, isn't it? Sister Barbara Barker, a specialist sick children's nurse, and Moira Onions, a midwife made nursing manager, have also been criticised by the inquiry team. However, last night, colleagues and parents of Allit's victims said the inquiry appeared to have sought individual scapegoats for the deaths and brain damage wreaked by Allit. How can you find scapegoats for somebody else being a murderer? They have tried to find scapegoats, yeah. That's my words, by the way. All four will be given the opportunity to respond to the report's allegations before it is finalised over the next few weeks. But their medical colleagues and the parents said yesterday that they feared the final report could divert blame from senior health service managers and the shoestring budgets, there's the important bit, that they believe caused the tragedy. Yeah. So in other words, shoestring budgets, let's go on. According to a Trent Regional Authority report on the hospital staffing levels, there should have been double the number working on the children's ward with at least 5 more doctors. Allit, so here we are, Allit's working on the ward, which is on a shoestring budget. She's a young girl, not, very highly qualified. And she's working on a ward where there should have been at least 5 more doctors and double the number working on the ward and on the shoestring budget. Allit was working on that ward and she received 13 life sentences for numerous last year, which would have been the year before, for numerous attacks on her patients after she began work in February 1991 as a nurse at the Lincolnshire Hospital. She was appointed only because of a shortage of nurses and a shortage of funds, which meant better qualified nurses could not be hired. I mean, you can't call this deja vu. Well, I mean, it could have done at the time, but I mean, the parallels with the Letby case are unbelievable. And Virginia Bottomley, Secretary of State for Health, appointed inquiry chair by Sir Cecil Clothier, QC. He did the inquiry, whose report is expected next month. The parents and health service organisations have been critical of her refusal to hold the inquiry in public. Well, no surprises there. Parents giving evidence to Sir Cecil told the inquiry they feared a whitewash. Would never believe that, would you? Like we ever get whitewashes. We were not asked any questions, just, this is the parents. The parents giving evidence to Sir Cecil told the Independent they feared a whitewash. We were not asked any questions, just told to say what we wanted to say, one parent said. The 3-member inquiry team did not include a paediatrician, an omission that led the British Medical Association to complain privately that Dr. Nana Yakara and Dr. Porter were not being judged by their peers, and that no specialist pediatric evidence was submitted. No surprises there either. There we go. The BMA said yesterday that the association was appalled by the burden of blame the doctors could be asked to carry. How so, when you've got a nurse convicted of murder? I mean, they're not being really, are they? I mean, they lost their jobs, but hey, something compared to what happened to Beverley Allit, is it? Anticipating the Clothier conclusions will be critical of staff, 3 leading medical experts will lend public support on Thursday to Dr. Nani Yakara and Dr. Porter. They will criticise the inquiry for failing to ask pertinent questions about staff numbers and hope an 11th hour revision of the Clothier's team's conclusions will be possible. Among the experts will be David Southall, surprise, surprise, an authority on Munchausen syndrome, of course, by proxy, the compulsion to inflict injury so as to give medical care that is believed to have driven Allit. Unison, the health service union representing most nurses at the hospital, also fears nursing staff, including Sister Barker and Mrs. Onions, will be made scapegoats. Our concern is that criticism will be deflected from more senior management. Bob Quick, the union's regional official, said yesterday. It has been claimed that Dr. Nani Yakara was suspicious of the death of Liam Taylor, aged 7 weeks. Allit's first victim. He tried without success to persuade the Grantham coroner, Thomas Pert, to order a specialist post-mortem examination that could have established that the baby had been killed. The hospital could not appoint a permanent pathologist because of bureaucratic logjam and mistakes were made. Mistakes were made in postmortems. Oh, right, okay. Well, there you go. And yeah, so I don't know, but I'm beginning to really suspicious about the Beverley Allit case. If she is not guilty, and I think she's always maintained her innocence, is Christ. You know, I mean, it's just unthinkable. There was I saw one report of a supposedly 11-year-old boy who was in the hospital, and I think his name was Paul Lilly. Now I don't know when he's supposed to come, because didn't appear to be any witnesses in the trial, and yet there seemed to be some reports about a boy, 11-year-old boy, who was in the hospital, and he supposedly witnessed Beverley Allit attacking a child. Now, it doesn't say what he witnessed, just attacking. Again, this word attack that's used about with Letby, she attacked. But there was nothing about what he's supposed to have actually seen. I've looked, I can't find what he's actually supposed to have seen in this so-called attack. So it's an 11-year-old boy that was in the hospital. Now, I'd like to know more details about what he said he saw. And if it was an 11-year-old that was ill, I mean, if he was in there for, I don't know what he was in there for. If he was in there because he was, I don't know, maybe he had some kind of delirium, and if he had any kind of issues or brain damage or anything, I'm not sure that can be sure that he saw. And also, if he could have been, if he already knew about the police investigation or what was going on, and he came out with this later, I don't know, because that would be, you wonder whether, you know, these ideas have been put into his head. I don't know. So that's something that was reported, and he got compensation for apparently the stress of having witnessed that. But there was also, again, this is just reports in the paper, because there was this family called the Jobsons, Beverley Allit. I remember at the time, reports about her being, because I assumed she was gay, because they were talking about her being with a partner, a female partner. I mean, I don't know, maybe she's bisexual, it's irrelevant. But remember, at the time, we're talking about the 1990s, there was still a lot of judgment against gay people. So if they wanted to present her as a lesbian, then that would have helped make her seem, slightly, whatever. Especially in those days. We all know I'm gay, right? So it wasn't easy to come out then. It really wasn't. So they still could use that word as a sort of a word to sort of make someone look slightly, I don't know. There were still a lot of people that were homophobic, put it that way. Say that, obviously they're going to want Beverley Allit to appear weird. We know that what they've done with Lucy, in terms of, she's weird because she doesn't cry at this point, or she doesn't do this, or she doesn't know what go commando means. I didn't know what go commando means. I honestly didn't. So fucking what? I mean, to be honest, if you're not someone who sort of finds, talks that way about sex and those kind of things, and I know what it means now, because obviously it's all been out there, right? But I didn't know. I had to look it up, right? So why is there something wrong with someone who doesn't? The whole thing was, but the way they tried to smear her in that kind of, she doesn't know what that means, or she was doing, what was she supposed to do? I can't even remember now. It was so ridiculous. Something to do with pyjamas or not? Something about her wearing pyjamas or coming out in her pyjamas, or God, it's even gone out of my head now because it was so irrelevant and ridiculous. I think they did. Oh yeah, that's right. She said she was arrested in her pyjamas, didn't she, Lucy? And they tried to make out she was lying about it or something, and then it turns out she was telling the truth because we saw that footage. But either way, so fucking what? I mean, even if she was lying about it, who cares? It doesn't have any bearing on whether she's a murderer or not. Personally, because all human beings lie, it's perfectly normal to lie. And in fact, and even in court cases, the police know very well that people say all sorts of things which aren't true, which has no bearing on whether they're guilty or innocent. What matters whether you're guilty or innocent is stuff that's directly related to the crime, not whether you lie about having an affair or these kind of things, which is totally irrelevant. But because I mean, it'd be funny actually if you ever think that human beings are honest. Watch the filming. There's a film called The Invention of Lying with Ricky Gervais, and it's actually really funny. But it's about a world where there's no such thing as lying, and what chaos that caused when people actually have to tell the truth all the time. And yeah, it's funny. So yeah, human beings lie. There's nothing unusual. So whether or not Lucy lied about this, whether she lied about having a bloody shredder, who cares? None of that bears on whether she's guilty or innocent. Yeah. Beverley Allit won't have been perfect, and she may have had all these things, and some of these things are unproven. She definitely may have had problems. She may have had some kind of issues. It seems she did have some kind of issues with self-harming, or she was going up and to the accident emergency or not. She may have been hypochondriac. Who knows? But at the end of the day, it doesn't mean that she's a murderer, but it does make her a good target for the police. That if you're in any way, if you've got any sort of question mark over your head of any kind of psychiatric condition or mental illness, and they want to use the scapegoat, we all know that they pick on the first possible weirdo that they can, especially if it's a case where there's high pressure for them to find somebody to take to the CPS to be to take the evidence to the CPS to get a conviction, so to get a trial. So anyway, yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to put the put what they do have against Beverley in terms, because there's no witnesses to her crimes, so-called crimes, apart from apparently this 11-year-old boy who saw her do something. I don't know what he's supposed to have seen her do, and I think that was after the event. That wasn't. But I need more details on that. But during the trial, I don't think there was any witnesses to the acts, the so-called acts. It was very similar, the whole scenario, to the Letby case in terms of what she's supposed to have done with no witnesses, and just literally she must have done it because there was a lot of deaths and in a short period of time, and we can't explain them, so therefore it must be murder, and therefore let's find the murderer. So anyway, she was living in this house with this family called the Jobson's family, and with this supposed gay partner, and I don't know if it was a gay partner or not, but it was a woman. And there's some stories in the paper about weird things she's supposed to have done while staying there. Well, things like smearing feces and apparently but then when you look at it, there's no. I mean, there was things that, and then you see the report of the paper says that things happened in the house while she was there. A dog was poisoned, apparently. I don't know what evidence there is of that. Did a dog get ill and it's later been assumed, oh, well, maybe she must have, but you know what I'm saying? Or then that she was supposed to poisoned one of the Jobson family with insulin, the son, the 11-year-old boy, I think, but then she wasn't convicted of that because there wasn't any evidence. And then there's this thing about she was supposed to have cooked feces under the grill. Again, this is a report in a paper. Were they because they do this, especially with women that they want to smear, if we don't have evidence that these things were done by her. And the Jobsons only came out with this after, because Mrs. Jobson, the mother of the girl that Beverley Allit was staying with, is supposed to have said that, be saying that Beverley Allit seemed very normal. Well, if she really was doing these things, like cooking feces under the grill and trying to poison dogs, would you say she was normal? No, you wouldn't. So why was she saying that she seemed very normal and not concerned at the time, but suddenly, when the police investigation is going on later on down the line, suddenly the weird things happen in the house and suddenly they're attributed to Beverley Allit. So look, I don't know, right? But we do know how these things can get twisted by the newspapers. So if this is just newspaper reports and we don't have proof, then it's hard to say that, obviously they're going to want Beverley Allit to appear weird. I mean, all this doesn't sound particularly credible to me, that first of all, that somebody would be apparently trying to poison your dog and cooking feces on your grill, and you would still allow them to stay there. I mean, not only would they not have been staying there one more minute in my house if they tried to do anything to my dog, but I think I would have been up in court for for trying to kill them, actually. I mean, I just, it doesn't make sense. And also, the other thing is, apparently she was accused of trying to hurt the 11-year-old son, or with insulin as well, give insulin to the 11-year-old son of this family she was staying with, this Mrs. Jobson, but she was cleared of that, and apparently there wasn't enough evidence. So again, it makes you wonder if this woman thought that Beverley Allit might have hurt her own son, that then her view of Beverley Allit is going to be coloured. Because remember, this is the same woman who said that Beverley Allit seemed about as normal as you can get, right? So and then these extreme stories come out, and it just, without any verification, really, just any backup, these are just newspaper stories, really. So we have to remember that that newspapers are very good at smearing people they want to appear as the angel of death or the witch of the wicked west, especially women. I also would add that the mental health services, and I know this from personal experience, they exaggerate massively when they want to present someone as a risk. So, and psychiatrists do this to protect their own backs, rather than take a risk with letting someone out or not giving them medication in order to justify. They then over amplify risk and write gossip down as fact. We know that what they've done with Lucy, in terms of, she's weird because she doesn't cry at this point, or she doesn't do this, or she doesn't know what Go Commando means. I didn't know what Go Commando means. I honestly didn't. So fucking what? To be honest, if you're not someone who sort of finds, talks that way about sex and those kind of things, and I know what it means now, because obviously it's all been out there, right? But I didn't know. I had to look it up, right? So why is there something wrong with someone who doesn't? The whole thing was, but the way they tried to smear her in that kind of, she doesn't know what that means, or she was doing, what was she supposed to do? I can't even remember now. It was so ridiculous. Something to do with pyjamas or not? Something about her wearing pyjamas or coming out in her pyjamas, or God, it's even gone out of my head now because it was so irrelevant and ridiculous. I think they did. Oh yeah, that's right. She said she was arrested in her pyjamas, didn't she, Lucy? And they tried to make out she was lying about it or something, and then it turns out she was telling the truth because we saw that footage. But either way, so fucking what? I mean, even if she was lying about it, who cares? It doesn't have any bearing on whether she's a murderer or not. Personally, because all human beings lie, it's perfectly normal to lie. And in fact, and even in court cases, the police know very well that people say all sorts of things which aren't true, which has no bearing on whether they're guilty or innocent. What matters whether you're guilty or innocent is stuff that's directly related to the crime, not whether you lie about having an affair or these kind of things, which is totally irrelevant. But because it'd be funny that if you ever think that human beings are honest, watch the filming. There's a film called The Invention of Lying with Ricky Gervais, and it's actually really funny. But it's about a world where there's no such thing as lying, and what chaos that caused when people actually have to tell the truth all the time. And it's funny. So yeah, human beings lie. There's nothing unusual. So whether or not Lucy lied about this, whether she lied about having a bloody shredder, who cares? None of that bears on whether she's guilty or innocent. Yeah. Beverley Allit won't have been perfect, and she may have had all these things, and some of these things are unproven. She definitely may have had problems. She may have had some kind of issues. It seems she did have some kind of issues with self-harming, or she was going up and to the accident emergency or not. She may have been a hypochondriac. Who knows? But at the end of the day, it doesn't mean that she's a murderer, but it does make her a good target for the police. That if you're in any way, if you've got any sort of question mark over your head of any kind of psychiatric condition or mental illness, and they want to use the scapegoat, we all know that they pick on the first possible weirdo that they can, especially if it's a case where there's high pressure for them to find somebody to take to the CPS to be to take the evidence to the CPS to get a conviction, so to get a trial. So
now this is, even though Beverley Allit was taken to custody in November, the Director of Public Prosecution was not sure whether the jury would convict her, because they did not have any direct evidence. They were all circumstantial. They did not have any direct evidence. Not have any direct evidence. Any direct evidence. All circumstantial. They were not sure anybody will convict her.
now he's talking about the rearrangement staff.
In his place came an iron-fisted special manager appointed to toe the departmental line, and then started the reign of terror within the hospital setting. And this guy was tough. He really was like a butcher or a hangman. But when the regional report came, on the left is, as usual, we had many media conferences, and so we were trying to answer questions about this regional report. But we later realized that the recommendations did not come from the report. This was twisted version. So that's another thing we can tell you later. Next. Now, all staffs therefore were made redundant, and we were able to therefore appeal to the Secretary of State of Health pending appeal. What that meant was, though, we remained as regional employees. We had to be extremely careful, because they did try their little pranks to suspend us in various ways. So we had to be very, very careful, but we remained employees under them.
I suppose my question is, why were they suspending and getting rid of and making redundant all these staff, consultants and some other nurses, when, you know, the culprit was supposed to be a murderer? You know, they seem desperate to get rid of these staff, and then they turn the hospital into a trust. And, you know, it sounds to me like they knew some of the staff had not done a great job. But then again, can you blame the staff if it was underfunded and they were understaffed? Do you know what I mean? But either way, you know, if you look at the Lucy case, the consultants are still working, aren't they? Yeah, in this case, they seemed to get rid of the staff. They knew there was problems, basically, and they wanted to cover it all up and then turn the hospital into a trust and scapegoat Beverley Allit. That's what I'm thinking. Like, I don't know for certain, and if other people think that Beverley Allit is guilty, then please put why or put your comments. But I think that's what's going on here.
Now, she eventually did admit to killing 3 babies, but did not say why, how, where, but did not admit any further. She still lives happily ever after at Rampton Hospital.
Yeah, he says she lives happily ever after at Rampton Hospital. Really? Okay. What a ridiculous statement. But anyway, what I would say is he says she admitted to killing 3 babies. Now, I've heard that before. There doesn't seem to be anything to back that up. And she's always maintained her innocence, and there's no proof that she's admitted to killing 3 babies that I can find anywhere, and other accounts say that that's never happened. So I don't know where that comes from, and it's really important because publicly she's always maintained her innocence, and I don't think there's any proof that she's admitted to anything. But also, I mean, after years of being in Rampton, high secure mental secure facility, I don't think, you know, you can't, I mean, she could have said anything. It can't be taken as gospel. That's it. You know, not in that situation. She can't be ruled, you know, because of the effect that will have had on her and her experiences happen. She might say all sorts of crazy things, or all sorts of things that didn't happen. You know, it can't be reliable. So, no, I don't know. But anyway, that's not verified. Also, Beverley Allit was convicted at age 22. Letby at age 33, and I've gone again into before the importance of the number 11 in the Kabbalah and to the Kabbalists. And 22, 33 is 3 times 11. 33 was the age of Jesus, you know, crucifixion. Now, 22 is 2/3 of 33. And 33 is 3 times 11, 22 is 2 times 11. The number 11 is extremely important to Kabbalists. It signifies new beginnings. It's the number of the Fool as well, the Fool in the Tarot, which is in some ways, Jesus is seen as a fool as well, because for ending up on the cross, but the Fool is the innocence, it's the path of the curious, the journey, the out there, the learning curve, that path. It is the sacrificial lamb. And that is number 11. And it's the 11th path on the tree of life. It's path 11, which is, I think it's Kether to Chokmah, or Chokmah to Kether on the tree of life. But anyway, it's path 11. And these paths, and 11 and 22, because 22 is twice 11, these numbers are very important. 11 is also linked again with justice, key, the justice in the tarot, because it's key 11, especially in the rider pack of the tarot, is justice. And so anything that's linked up with 11 and the justice system, again, that's something that they play around with. With Lucy, again, she was 33, 3 times 11, age of Jesus, crucifixion, etc., etc. I remember 22, 11, 2 times 11 is 22, 3 times 11 is 33. Beverley Allit was 22 when she was convicted. Beverley Allit is, now Lucy's Capricorn in Western astrology. Beverley Allit is Libra. She was, I think it's 4th of, I just looked up her birthday, it was in October, beginning of October. So, 4th of October, I think. She is a Libra in Western astrology. A Libra again, we got the balance, that's the scales of justice, okay, Libra. So not surprising they picked a Libra there, because they think this is justice, picking their scapegoat. And so, yeah, the scales of justice, and also that's Western astrology, but if you went into Vedic astrology, you then get into, possibly, I can't say exactly, but she might then become Virgo, which, because it would be roughly the sign that to us in Western comes before Libra, would be Virgo. In the yearly thing, so again, Virgo is the Virgin, so again, why would they pick that? A Virgo or a Libra? Libra, Justice, Virgo, Virgin. In Lucy's case, we had, she's Capricorn, isn't she? So that's the scapegoat, obviously. That's Azazel, the goat, which is the original scapegoat, is Capricorn. Capricorn is a goat. That's why Lucy was, she had to be Capricorn, didn't she? So, Beverley Allit today, she's been there now, she's in her 50s now. So she's been there since the 1990s, and she's in her 50s. She's a bit younger than me. So whatever state she's in now, and I shouldn't think it's very good, it's not a good environment. And she applied to go back to prison. She applied to go to prison. She applied to be transferred to prison. So it's a normal prison system, so she should presumably apply for parole. She hasn't been able to, and they've kept her locked away in Rampton, hidden behind closed doors, on the idea that she had Munchausen's, whatever crap that's supposed to be. Southall was involved with that, and it's just BS, isn't it? We know. It beggars believe if she's not guilty, and from what I've seen so far, I don't see any evidence that she is guilty. I've seen one. I've seen that there was supposed to be a child, 11-year-old child, who called Paul Lilly, I think. He was supposed to. There was no witnesses to anything she did, but this 11-year-old child has come out later and said that he witnessed her attacking one of the children on the ward. Well, and he got compensation for this. Well, but I've tried to look for what this 11-year-old is supposed to have witnessed, and I can't find the details of what he's supposed to have witnessed. We just get the word attack. Well, we've had that with Lucy, attack, without any actual how are they supposed to have done this attack. So what did this 11-year-old witness? Was he put, at what point did this 11-year-old say he witnessed something? Because, if ideas were put in his head, if he'd already heard that she was a this and a that and a murderer and potential, if this came later, then I would find that quite unsafe. I don't know. If it was an 11-year-old also that was ill, what was wrong with him? Was he, if he had any kind of delirium or if he wasn't very well, he could have also, not been clear about what he saw. I don't know. But I've tried to find that on the 11-year-old. I don't know. It just says that he witnessed Beverley Allit doing something, attacking one of the children, and that he got compensation for it. But apart from that, there was no witnesses and nothing. And this came out later, so I don't, until I see more details of what this boy, this 11-year-old, is supposed to have seen happen and how reliable that is in terms of what kind of state was the boy in. Was he already aware of the accusations against Beverley Allit when he came out with this? Because it seems that at first there was no witnesses to anything. So, yeah, I need more clarity on that. But apart from that, again, there was no witnesses. And we had this whole bloody insulin thing again with the high C-peptide, low bloody blaze on one of the children. And twins were in there as well and all this. So anyway, yeah, and, some of the deaths were explained. And they say again it's unexpected, but some of them it seems there were reasonable reasons for these deaths, and yet they still had to find, because they had a lot of deaths in a short period of time. Again, then they brought in the statisticians, and again blah blah blah. Oh well, we've had a spike, and therefore it must be murder, and therefore we need someone to scapegoat, because otherwise the management of the hospital is going to be in trouble. If Beverley Allit is innocent and she's in Rumpton, she's been put in a secure hospital for her life, really. And if she is not guilty, and I think she's always maintained her innocence, is Christ. It's just unthinkable.